thank you for coming along. We welcome to the graveyard shift, which is tends to be where we reside, and I would definitely take the opportunity to make sure I introduce Brad Kruger from Sunbelt, who's the co-chair of this council, and I've been very interested to hear some of the presentations that have been made, and so we're going to make a presentation on a couple of industry issues that we have talked about in previous council meetings and presentations. And also we'd like to talk a little bit about how we move forward in the strange days that we find ourselves in. And one of the questions we'd like to bring up today and maybe get some input on and offer some input on is how we are going to facilitate operator training in respect to social distancing and sanitisation and all these other buzzwords that we've all suddenly come across. And so I want to start with our agenda today. We'll bring up some updates and some topics for discussion that have previously been discussed and look at those. Then go into the COVID-19 considerations. And then open up for any new business that anyone would like to introduce. And if there are any questions, then we'll deal with those at the end before we start drinking beer for the President's virtual soiree. So the first thing that we had talked about previously in some of our meetings was how we as an industry can improve safety performance. And one of the subjects that has come up in the past is sales training and a proposal as part of an industry betterment, if you like, betterment of an industry. What do we and how do we train our sales personnel and what do they need to know? And the second topic that we will cover will be owners' duty of care responsibilities, which is another discussion that we've touched on in the past. And I think Brad and I would like to offer some solutions maybe, or some advice through the SAIA that might be useful out there in the field. And so the first question that comes up is are our sales personnel / estimators, which is what they are, really competent enough to complete a job survey? And that question is about not just their competence, but the legal definition of competent or the legal definition of qualified. So in other words, we're trusting them to go out to the job site and to measure up the job site to produce a price, but we're also trusting them to go out there and discharge our responsibilities with regard to identifying existing and predictable hazards on the job, which will form part of a plan, which then becomes a price, and then becomes a blueprint for the job to move ahead. And part of that competent person's responsibility would be to survey the job and to gather the information required to plan and to mitigate any of those hazards that they find. And those hazards will find themselves into a discussion about, you can't put a machine here, it has to go there because of, for instance, overhead power lines, trenching, underground voids such as basements or underground car parks, and to find a way to deal with those, which yes will impact the price, but secondarily will also impact the plan and the hazard communication and the training. And the question is right now, is this being done consistently and in a way that establishes protection for the equipment owner and or the rental company? Because the equipment owner or the rental company is essentially saying, Mr. Salesman, here is our liability we want you to go out and manage some of that by planning the job to mitigate against existing and predictable hazards. So are our sales personnel absolutely qualified to do that? So one of the ways I think in which we can help them with that is if we all use the same documentation and procedures as an industry. In other words, to collaborate to help to protect ourselves. We are a small industry, but we're a really important industry. We all know each other very well, and we all compete, yes, but we all have the same raison d'etre at the end of the day, which is we want to make sure our industry performs safely, and we want to make sure that we help our customers to be safe and to make money. And if we do those two things, then our product will be in constant demand. So it's a really important exercise. So one of the things that Brad and I have talked about is, we have some SAIA tip sheets which came through part of the SAIA alliance with OSHA. And those tip sheets are for safe use of the product, ground conditions and what to think about when planning an installation with regard to ground conditions, and tying to the structure. These 3 tip sheets are currently available on the SAIA Alliance website. So one of the things that Brad and I talked about was, well, we've got 3 of those tip sheets right now, and I know that I include them in my training courses, and I know of others who include them in theirs. That's very good information and advice. Why don't we think about a tip sheet to deal with the job survey and a tip sheet to think about duty of care? Now, they don't have to be alliance tip sheets. That's a rather elongated process to have to go through initially. But we would ask the SAIA and our members if the tip sheets could be an SAIA product, a committee or a council product, a website product, to augment the existing 3 tip sheets. And what would they look like? Here is a mock-up of how the job survey tip sheet might look. And this is a discussion document, and anyone who would like to have a copy of this to mull over and to think about after the presentation is absolutely welcome, of course, to get a copy of this. I guess we can make them centrally available through Jackie or Deanna, or obviously through Brad or myself. But Mast Climbing Work Platform safety begins with an effective job survey completed by a qualified person. And if it's successfully completed, it will identify the most effective installation plan and identify the existing and predictable hazards to be resolved. The safety tip sheet, their safety tip sheet, is designed to assist in identifying many of those main aspects. So the tip sheet begins by saying, look, what's the primary purpose of the equipment? What do you want it for? Because establishing the primary purpose for the equipment can provide information on many other aspects of the installation plan. The primary purpose will help identify the capacity. If the primary purpose is for block work, you know what the capacity is required. If it's for stucco, you know that you don't need all of that capacity. And that transfers itself into then the speed of the equipment. If it's a piece of equipment for block work, it's going to be a slow-moving, high-capacity unit. If it's a piece of equipment for stucco, it's going to be a fast-moving, lighter capacity unit. So that's identified what the customer expects. It's also then going to have an impact on the configuration or configurations. That configuration or configurations will then determine the number of sets and the number of repositions and the number of, and the likely duration of the project or the duration of the existence of the equipment on the job site. It will also affect other things like planking. And all of these things go together to produce a layout plan and a price. So the primary purpose is a vital piece of information and a very good piece of information to know up front. We're then asking, as part of the job survey, that our personnel assess the ground conditions. Can the ground underneath the mast positions take the weight of the units proposed? Not only today, but throughout the duration of its existence in that location. Are there any underground protrusions like basements, car parks, which might require shoring? Can we make sure that there are no drainage, or there is no drainage or trenching work scheduled in and around the vicinity of the mast climber chassis base plate mud cell area? And also we can refer them to the existing SAIA OSHA Alliance tip sheet on ground conditions for further information and the assessment of those ground conditions. Then we come on to the subject of mast placement. Will any of the masts block emergency egress from the structure? That's a consideration. When they're walking around the job, we want them to be looking for any voids, balconies, step-ins, which may affect the positions of the masts. Are there any overhead power lines near the intended equipment positions? Are there any future crane or hoist installations planned which may interfere with or be close in proximity to existing mast positions? Then we want to know about mast attachment. Our operational people need this information. How will the mast be attached to the structure? What will the tie intervals be? For instance, are we talking about 10 foot between slabs or 14 or 15 feet between slabs? The tie-in, the number of tie-ins will obviously be or can be different depending on the structure itself and the intervals. Is there any reinforcement post-tension cables present in the slab which could affect anchor depth? Will the parapet detail affect the ability to use it for an anchor position, or will it affect the anchor positions? And again, we can refer at that point to the existing SAIA OSHA Alliance tip sheet on tying to the structure for more detail. We also need information on general site conditions. Is there an identified laydown and storage area on the job site? Is there any available access for delivery trucks and company vehicles? Are there any mast positions near the site entrance or high traffic areas that we might need to protect? Is there an orientation process required for operational staff? What are the site rules on fall protection? For example, PPE, debris netting. The amount of calls that I get from people who say, I've turned up on this job, and all of a sudden they tell me that there's a 100% tie-off rule. Really, it would be nice to know that way in advance so that we can plan for it, facilitate for it, or go back to the GC and say, hey, we don't need it, or here is our other solution. But when people turn up on a job site and they get that kind of information, it's way too late in the game. There are also general contractors who will say that I don't care if you have a guardrail or not. If it leaves the ground, it requires to be 100% debris netted. That's something that needs to be flagged way earlier in the process. Are there site requirements for certification? For example, do the operational staff require OSHA 30 or forklift licenses or rigging and signalling qualifications? These are all things that we should be finding out when we're walking the job. And what are the chemical control and cleanup requirements? Example, spill kits. What SDS information is required to be submitted? We also need to know, in the dismantle phase, will the tower crane be available? The usual answer is never, but we really need to know that, because the problem is if we use the tower crane to erect it, we have to make sure that the tie spacings are applicable to manual disassembly. Will stability be affected by anchor removal during dismantle? We need to know. Will there be truck access for equipment removal? And then lastly, training. What will the training requirements be throughout the project duration in terms of operator training? Or are a number of contractors intending to use the equipment and therefore different trainings will be required? And what type of training will be required? Is it all operator training, or is there an element of installer training required on the job? And although this is not an exhaustive list, the tip sheet could provide guidance on general considerations that are necessary to be able to fully compile an installation plan. Additional specific job conditions may require further analysis and consideration, but some of the questions in this tip sheet may flag up those extra considerations as part of the process. So this is the first tip sheet that we thought would be useful for the industry, an SAIA product that could go out as general good advice and information through the Council's webpage. So what I'm hoping to do is at the end of the presentation, if you have any questions or any contribution to make on these subjects, then we'll deal with those at the end. Now, part of that process is how would that find its way into a live rental situation. And so what I'd like to do at the moment is pass over the mic to Brad to basically talk about how this becomes reality in the rental world. Brad, if you'd like to just take this slide, then that'd be great.
Sure, thank you, Kevin. Good afternoon, everyone. So as Kevin spoke about, we all know that a safe and successful job starts with a good plan. And in order for us to gather the information in order to execute a plan, we need someone out there, as Kevin specified, whether it's a sales rep or an estimator that's qualified enough to identify all of the hazards associated with doing the job and then executing the job in an efficient way, in a timely manner as well. So this is just an example of one of the surveys that we use here internally to identify not only the hazards associated with doing the job, but some of the things relative to what Kevin covered as far as how we get into the job, how we're tying to the structure, and really all of the information that's going to be relative to the job. So, and really all of us, hopefully all of us are using something that's either similar in the information that's gathered, and although there may be some differences specific to the type of unit manufacturer, the type of power, whether it's gas or electric, everything that Kevin just reviewed in the tip sheet, and everything he and I have discussed, and hopefully you're all in agreement. I'd like to hear some comments at the end of the presentation. Most of those items are consistent with what any competent or qualified person should be looking for prior to commencing a job. So again, this is just an example. We use a survey that allows for drop-down boxes, and that we feel as though that makes it a lot easier for the person that's evaluating the job beforehand to not overlook anything. You know, there's a lot going on the job sites. There's a lot of different things that our people are looking for. There's a lot of distractions as well. So we want to make sure that being able to access the information is easy, but being able to not overlook any, we want to make sure that that person's not overlooking any of the information as well. So this type survey is not the be all and the end all, but what we want to do is make sure whatever you're using, whatever we're using industry wide, covers the gamut from a safety perspective specifically, and then of course allowing our people to get in there and efficiently do the job. And you can, again, this is just an example, but if I don't think any of the items that are covered here are not common to any of our Mast timer installations, whether it's no matter who the manufacturer is or who the rental company is. These are all critical pieces of information. So, you know, we're hoping not necessarily in the absence of using a survey, the tip sheet will allow for owners, users, operators to easily access some guidelines that'll help them to better survey a job when they're going out to look at a job, and really remind them of the things that are going to be critical to the safe execution of the job. I mean, in closing, it's not necessarily, it's the primary use is obviously identifying all of the hazards associated with doing the job, but there's a lot of helpful information in there too to allow for. I think we've all lived some of the experiences when we're doing a mast climber job or any type of job really, whether it's a swing or scaffold job, of how we actually access the job, how we get into the job, how our trucks get into the job, our laydown areas, our training, as Kevin talked about, or anything that's site specific. So this information is really helpful and really allows our people to gather everything that they need to safely execute the job and do it in a manner that brings it in, you know, obviously taking customer service and bringing the job in on time and on budget as well. So a lot of good detail. Hopefully we're all using something that's similar. And Kevin and I are proposing to then add the tip sheets to allow for someone to access these items as well and put them into practice. So with that being said, unless there's any other questions, I'll turn it back over to you, Kevin.
Thanks, Brad.
So I have a couple of questions here, guys.
James, can I leave the questions to the end, because I've already had some people flagging in the questions.
Sure.
If I just
I'm sorry.
leave them,
Go ahead.
No, you're good, bud. I just wanted to introduce the next topic for the tip sheet area, and then we'll definitely deal with the questions at the end. Another subject that's come up in our topics for discussion recently in our council meetings is owners' duty of care responsibilities, and normally with regard to inspection and maintenance and repair. And I think we all know that we'd love to encourage these to be less sporadically done, right? But, you know, and we'd also like to make sure that the people who are doing it are qualified. And we'd also really like it if records were kept. But the reality is that these things are still within certain factions of the industry rarely done, and it'd be nice to find a way to continually encourage more improvement in that area or in these areas. And so the second proposal, or the proposed tip sheet, would be an SAIA tip sheet on duty of care for the equipment. So again, a little bit of a preface: mast climbing work platform owners and users have responsibilities under OSHA and ANSI to maintain the equipment while under their care and custody. The following information is intended as a guide to identify what the regulations would require. So the first aspect is qualified service/maintenance staff. And the question would be, are your staff truly qualified to carry out user or owner required inspections? That would be daily / pre-use inspection. On many occasions now there's a weekly inspection required. Certainly there's a frequent / 3-month inspection that's required by manufacturer and by ANSI, and similarly an annual inspection. So the first part of the tip sheet is to remind owners and users of equipment with whatever inspection responsibilities they have decided to take on, is that the people who are doing them require to be qualified to do that. The second part for owners is record keeping. And it's good practice to have a history file on each Mast Climbing Work Platform, containing the last 3 years of annual inspections. That's an ANSI requirement. The required frequent inspections since the last annual, details of any major repairs to the equipment, and a record of manufacturer's authorization for those repairs. It's really good practice if you're going to make a major repair to make sure the manufacturer is okay with it and get their advice or input on it. Details of any structural repairs and a record of the manufacturer's okay for that. If you're going to get into the world of repairing platform sections and all these other structural areas, it would be absolutely the most sensible thing you could do to make sure you get the manufacturer's input and okay on it. Component control. Simple things like, do you have identified areas in the yard for equipment ready, for equipment that's come in that's identified for repair, for a scrap/disposal area for equipment that you know is not going to be used again and has to be properly scrapped or disposed of, and then a quarantine area, maybe for equipment that's waiting for a manufacturer's authorization to do something or an opinion from the manufacturer on whether it can be repaired or not, or how it could be repaired. Then operational procedures. For instance, are you conducting pre-delivery inspections? It's interesting actually when you talk to owners of equipment and you ask, do you inspect the equipment when it comes back in from rent? And the answer is absolutely. Why? Because it generates an invoice. And then you say, well, do you inspect the equipment before it goes out? And there's not so many yeses. So it's good practice, absolutely, to make sure that you're indicating by paperwork that the equipment is being inspected and is therefore good for use before you rent the equipment out. Our installation personnel completing handover paperwork before turning the equipment over for use, including serial numbers, including the configuration of the equipment as they built it and tested it, including details of the job site, the customer and the primary use is identified. You know, if you built the equipment to be used by the stucco contractor and it's medium duty equipment with a relatively low capacity for somebody who's doing block or brick, and then all of a sudden the block or the brick guy gets on and starts using it, it'd be good if you had detail to indicate that you didn't build it for that purpose if something were ever to go wrong. And that the paperwork should indicate a transfer, a formal transfer of the responsibility for inspection and safe use to the user company at that point. And then it would also be good to have on that paperwork a list of the initially trained operators on the job. Next, it would be good if this tip sheet talked about general procedures. A reminder to say if you're using or are you using proprietary critical components when replacing? If you do not, do you have the manufacturer's permission? You know, are you not using the manufacturer's equipment to tie to the structure and replacing it with something that you rigged up yourself? These critical components are critical for a reason, and if they fail, and if you haven't used the manufacturer's components, or if you have replaced them, then you're in a position of some liability should something go wrong. Are you periodically checking to verify with the user company that daily or pre-use inspections are being completed and recorded? Just about any manufacturer will have a piece of paper available with the ability to record daily inspections on there. It will provide a list of what needs to be recorded, check boxes for if it has been recorded, and usually a signature to say who recorded them or who did the checks. Are you periodically checking to verify with the user company that there are trained personnel on the equipment? This is something that I've been talking to our salespeople about, which is if I've got a sales guy going on a job and he gets on the job and he sees the equipment being used and he doesn't recognize the people on the equipment and knows that they haven't been trained and that they should be trained, I want the sales guy qualified to do the operator training. I don't want him walking off the job and saying, I'm going to call the office and get somebody out here to train, because you know what's going to happen when he leaves the job site, they're going to use it anyway. So whoever gets on the job and whoever establishes that training is required, I really want everybody to at that point be qualified to do it with the training materials. Are you periodically checking to verify that there is no unauthorized equipment, use of the equipment on the job site? So these are things that come under the heading of duty of care. And although not an extensive or exhaustive list, the sheet provides guidance on general considerations that would be necessary to be able to exercise appropriate duty of care obligations, to know what's happening to your equipment, to know that you're looking after it properly. Valid questions. So again, as Brad and I had talked about, we'd propose that you would have a look at the idea of a duty of care SAIA tip sheet. And we would absolutely welcome contributions, contents on content and any comments that you have on any of this. The last thing I want to talk about before we kind of have a discussion period is COVID-19 operator training. We've got all the states beginning to open up now. Many of the job sites that were going, maybe on a skeleton staff basis, are now beginning to look at opening up. Certainly there are new jobs that are ready to kick off that have been delayed. And part of that is going to be the requirement for operator training. The question is, what do we need now to consider when we're doing operator training? And so the question is there something that we feel as members of the SAIA that we could collectively put out there as information and guidance for anyone who is thinking about conducting operator training on the job sites in the near or medium future? And so I wanted to talk about something that we may want to look at, consider, and maybe introduce as SAIA guidance. And the document will begin with some general advice about doing the 5, which is hands, wash them immediately before training commences. Face, don't touch it and wear a mask. Elbow, cough or sneeze into it. Feet, stay 6 feet apart at all times during the training. If closer distance is necessary, make sure that a mask is worn by both and that minimize the close working time. If it's only for a couple of minutes, then it should only be a couple of minutes. If you feel sick, immediately notify the trainer and leave the training and notify employers for action. So if the instructor or the trainer should be introducing the concept of the 5 to trainees before the training takes place. If any trainer or trainee has had to leave the training due to illness and subsequently is confirmed with COVID-19, he or she must follow their employer reporting procedure and should advise their employer and also notify the trainer who is conducting the class, because there will be other actions that will be required from the employers of the others on the training course. So some general advice that we may want to look at. Preparation for the course, overview and general safety. Additional measures right now. Additional trainer PPE. Trainers will need to, I think, wear masks and gloves. Trainees, similarly, would be asked to wear masks and gloves. And also, if they refuse to wear them, should we be saying to them that they should not be allowed to attend or take part in the training? What supplies does the trainer and the trainee need? Well, we're going to need some kind of test paper, practical assessment, pre-use inspection sheet to go through the pre-use inspection, and even stupid things that we don't think about on a daily basis, like everybody should have their own pen. We can't be passing out pens and collecting them in at the end of the training. And we don't want pencils, and I'll explain why as we go through the process. We probably should have a trainee attestation sheet, one per trainee, to say that they are fit to be able to take part in the training and that they have not displayed any symptoms of COVID-19 in the past 14 days. A trainer should probably have a cleaning sterilisation kit for machine controls. Once the practical part of the test is taking place and the prospective operators are on the machine, after each one has operated the equipment, probably there needs to be a sanitisation process before the next trainee appears on the equipment. A copy of the operating section of the owner's manual, one per trainee, which we give out and we don't get back. They keep it. If there's a classroom aspect to it, we need to inspect the classroom for the ability to achieve social distancing. There will be a chart that I'll look at in a moment with respect to how we might achieve that. If the classroom is unsuitable and if there is no suitable alternative, it will be preferable to conduct the classroom section probably on the machine, weather permitting, or in part of the structure of the building, in an area which gives plenty of space and room. So before the training commences, each trainee should complete the trainee attestation sheet, and when complete, the trainer would photograph the completed document, but the trainee should retain the document so that the trainer has a record of it without actually taking it back from the trainee. Pre-use inspection. During the daily inspection section, arrange trainees to stand 6 feet apart and 6 feet away from the unit. We have to respect distancing while the others are waiting to go through that daily inspection part. One trainee at a time should go through the details of the inspection while reviewing the entries on the pre-use daily inspection sheet. They should retain their copy of the inspection sheet. Again, the trainer needs to manage the social distancing during this part. Safe operation. Trainees need to be arranged to stand apart at distances and in positions that they were in during the pre-use inspection. One trainee at a time is the idea. And for instance, here we see a situation where we have a machine, an instructor, a trainee at the controls, and then the other trainees spaced waiting to then take their turn on the equipment to be able to get used to the controls, to respect the social distancing. In the operator's manual review, there's a written test. The trainees should still fill out the test. They should keep their test papers. The trainer should then talk through the answers, and the trainees will mark correct or not on their test papers. And that's the reason for only now in pen, because we can now see if they have changed any answers or if they have changed the correct from the wrong answer to the correct answer, and we need to manage that. But at the end, the trainer will be confident that they have correctly marked their test score on the paper. Again, pedantics. We want them to mark the test score on the top right of the front page of the test next to their name, and then we want to have them hold that test paper up in front of them and photograph it so that we have a record. And in the class, we need to have some kind of plan for trainees to observe social distancing, and similarly for the instructor. And then when it comes to the trainer wrap-up, when we ask the trainee to stand in for a photograph that respects, and again in an area that respects social distancing, we've got the usual hats and face coverings need to be removed for the photograph, so trainer needs to be 6 feet away. The candidate's written test paper containing their name and score on the front will be held up chest height for inclusion in that photograph. the candidates will retain their test paper, daily inspection form, and operator's instructions. The trainer will then retain the practical assessment, because the trainer will have been in possession of that all the way through, and will retain the pictures on the telephone. Then when they need to use those pictures, maybe to produce the training card, they can crop the picture to take out the test paper part and retain it, saved as a separate picture, passport picture of the trainee. That will give the trainer all of the information he or she needs. Lastly, there needs to be a cleaning and sanitisation of the classroom tables, the chairs, door handles, etc. if classroom training was done. So this is some of the stuff that Brad and I thought we could look to the SAIA and to our members for, is 2 new tip sheets available on the website for the job survey advice to our sales personnel, and also duty of care to owners and users of equipment. And also a procedure for the management of social distancing and sanitisation processes during operator training. In terms of new business, we're looking for member ideas for future meetings. Obviously, we're always looking for that. Speakers, topics, challenges. Maybe by the time we get to the next meeting, we may be together in an auditorium somewhere, maybe. Or maybe we have to bring up other challenges at that point at the next meeting with regard to COVID, if it still exists at that point. But we're looking for ideas from members for future meetings. We're looking for ideas about how we can train and recruit and look at industry challenge creative solutions. You know, how can we attract new people into the industry? How can we make it more sexy for them? Because right now it's not, that's for sure. And maybe that's down to us, I don't know. But it's not a sexy industry right now. It's a bit like the mason industry will tell you the same story. They're finding it very difficult to bring youngsters into the business. And we understand why, but there must be a way to attract them. SAIA question, what more can the SAIA do to support the members at the moment? Do you feel like there's anything else the SAIA can do for us or for you? Sharing of ideas and resources. One of the things that I think would help us as an industry is commonality of documents. So we're all using documentation that comes from a single point source, i.e. an SAIA tip sheet. And then we're creating documents that essentially look, 90% the same. As Brad said, we're going to have differences in documentation, sure. But if it's 90% the same throughout our industry, we have got an amazing defence mechanism for our liability going forward. If all of our industry is following similar practices and everything begins to look similar. And the last one is, what can we do to collaborate? We are a small industry. We don't step on each other's toes too often out there, but we can collaborate. And the more that we collaborate, and the more that we have common practices, the stronger we will be in our defence, the stronger we will be in the way that we move forward with safe working practice. So I'd ask, I'll stop sharing my screen, and I would ask if anyone has any comments or any discussion. We've got